A couple of weeks ago, a TV show on the UK's ITV TV channel became its biggest drama hit in 22 years. No real news there, but what was different was that this wasn't some fantasy story on some historical epic, but a story about how regular ordinary post office workers were bankrupted and jailed for crimes they didn't commit due to a faulty computer system. But why did a story, which on the face of it sounds interesting but not particularly groundbreaking, we hear about these kinds of stories all the time, dominate the headlines in the UK so much? The thing that makes it even more interesting was that this wasn't a new story. It had been reported on for years by journalists. Reporters had worked really hard to get the story out there, but the public didn't react. So why now? With what we do all being about connection and how to get stories to resonate with the public, it's quite an interesting case study, right? Now, on LinkedIn the other day, I saw a former national newspaper website editor for the Express newspapers in the UK write a short article talking about this story and referencing why we need to think about how people react and why, using this as a case study. So I did the best thing I could, and I invited her on the Public Relations podcast, and Helen Barnett joins me right now. A very good morning to you, Helen.
Hello, thanks for having me.
It's wonderful. I was really prompted by your article because it really got me thinking about this, because it does raise this whole question of why did people react. But maybe you could just provide a very quick bit of context about what it was like when you were trying to report on it at the Express.
Yeah, so like you said, I was a national website editor. So what that means is that we see all the data in real time as you put a story live. And I think it was something like 2020. There'd just been some development, a success for the campaign. And we put the story up, we broke it within a few minutes, stuck it straight to the top of the homepage.
So you're like thinking, this is a really juicy story. It's a great development. People are going to love it. And then?
It was just crickets. It was, you'd get a few people who look at it. We sent a push alert out on the app. We put it on social media. It's straight, like I say, top of the homepage, and people just weren't really engaging in it. And so what that means in national media online is that if something's not converting, it generally ends up dropping down the homepage quite quickly, and you replace it with something that is working. And that's not necessarily the case in print media, but what it does mean is they'll put maybe a lead in the newspaper, sort of gauge the reaction, see if there's any developments coming through, and if there's not much of a buzz, then it will just sort of
It's interesting though, isn't it? Because you're getting to see this real-time data. It's something that PR people almost dream of, isn't it? Of having that kind of real-time feedback. Okay, you don't want a campaign that you've thought about for months to go flat, but it's useful to be able to see exactly what people are reacting to. And why do you think they did? I mean, you made the point in your article about the importance of showing, not telling. Explain that to us a little bit.
So I think there's a few issues as to why the story didn't necessarily grab people. It's been such a long-winded saga. This has been going on for 2 decades, and there's been a lot of dragging of feet from the post office whenever they've been confronted with anything. And what that means is when you have to then explain the story again, you have to explain all the background, and that necessarily people aren't interested in going through all the homework they have to go through to actually get to the nub of the story. So I think that was one of the reasons why it didn't necessarily sell, because people had to think, what is this story again? What's going on?
There was a lot to it because it was so... I suppose that's the thing with the TV drama, is by the very nature of watching a TV drama, you want the background, don't you?
Exactly. And I think what was clever is that they focused on just a few people's stories and really went into detail as the heartache and the helplessness and the frustrations that they had. So instead of it being a story about the hundreds of sub-postmasters who have been wrongly convicted, it's a couple of people who you can relate to and think, God, that could have just happened to me. And I think when you've got a TV show, because it is a storyline, the writers can pick the most emotive storylines. They can really pick the biggest things that they want to hone in on that may have happened over this course of 5 years. But because you've got a TV show, you can put them all into 1 hour. Even within 20 minutes, you have got an emotional connection to those characters. So I think that's why the TV show really hit home the injustice of it all.
I suppose the other problem as well, when you're doing an update from a journalism point of view, is you haven't got the end of the story, have you? Whereas they could round up, it's the classic beginning, middle, end story, and you're reporting a little bit in the middle. So you haven't got that payoff. You haven't got that emotional payoff for the people following the story.
Definitely. And I think as well, because it did start out like, we all trusted the post office and what they were saying. So you would have these people in the local communities who were being wrongly convicted, but you were going with what was happening in court and what the results were. So originally, these people were seen as people who had broken the law. Now, obviously, we know so much more of what's happened, but it's also that switch of the narrative in your own minds as a audience member to think, if you were reading that in the paper, you've got to think, well, that person we thought they were bad, and now
you've got to challenge your preconceived. There's some great points in here, though, from a PR perspective. I mean, what do you pull out of it? You're a PR now, so I mean, what do you pull out of it in terms of how to deliver a story? I mean, one of the thoughts I had straight away when I was reading your article was, you so often see press releases which got like the word groundbreaking or something like that in it, but it's like, words that trigger emotions for me are things like left penniless, which is very different from using a word like groundbreaking. It brings us, it tells a story and an emotion. I don't know. What do you pull from that?
I think the things that I thought of, so I do content strategy with my clients, and we look at how to best put their own messages across. Like you said before, show, don't tell. So, if you're wanting to show that, somebody has been left with nothing, you show that and get the emotion rather than just saying, I've got nothing. So I think that's the difference in the storytelling. It's the showing the emotion, and people do connect with people. You could relate to those people in the TV show because they're not looking to make a quick buck, and they're not looking to become massively rich. They're just people in your community who are just doing their best, had an idea to have a nice, comfortable life, not with loads of riches, but just a comfortable life and doing their bit for the community. So I think that's another thing that people really related to.
What about actually pitching this, though? Because this is the problem, again, is that if you've got a big, complex story and you're trying to pitch it, whether it's journalists or content creators or even just directly to the public on social media, trying to condense the post office story into a tweet, it's like, how do you draw that story out in just those few words? I think that's the challenge.
Yeah, I think that's really interesting because, I mean, I'm not here to say anything bad against the Justice for Sub Postmasters group, because their job wasn't to do PR on themselves. Their job was to get a result in court. And obviously they've done that incredibly. It's now interesting thinking, how do we tell that story? And I think it's definitely the picking out the human aspects that people can relate to. I think that there is a case for, if you had social media, you could be looking at getting people to provide their own content because it makes them feel involved and make a little community. And I also think, picking just a few people, just a few stories is better than trying to sell a whole message. You use sort of a couple of really compelling stories to show the message instead. I think that's kind of what I've taken from this.
Because one of the challenge always with getting anyone's attention is trying to sell a story quickly, isn't it? Any journalist just wants to know what the crux of it is in 5 seconds or less, ideally. And when you've got a complex story like this, or if you're releasing some kind of product, or you've got some campaign which has got a lot of nuance to it, it shows, I think, the importance of focusing in on, well, you said the human element, obviously, but on one aspect of it that will immediately make a reporter, content creator, or whoever just feel something, isn't it? So it's like it's really condensing it down to that crux. You think?
Yeah, and it's kind of thinking, what does my audience need, and what do they really relate to? So, like I say, I do content strategy rather than PR, and what I always look at is what is the target market for this product, client, service. What are their problems, and what do they really care about? And then you can find the media outlet that will relate to that as well. It doesn't necessarily need to be a national press. It could be trade. It could be the local press. It could be your own podcast. So it's just finding out what really matters to your key market, I think.
Yeah, and tailoring it. That's the thing, isn't it? It's finding those triggers. But it also comes back to that interesting point again about the data, isn't it? Is the struggle of understanding your market as well as you can so that you can work out what those trigger points are. I mean, I remember my time in radio news, but from your experience with the website, were you just getting a sense every day of kind of what people were currently reacting to? How did you kind of know what would be a good idea to put on there?
Yeah, so I think we work really hard to have a persona for our readers. So we kind of know the things that tick their boxes, what they really care about. We didn't necessarily always follow the same agenda that everybody else did, because I think that makes you a bit stale and can make you a little bit more generic. So having a voice and working that out. And there are ways to do that as well. If you're PR trying to work out to pitch which titles to pitch to, have a look in the comments. I know sometimes it can be a little bit scary to look in there, but you will really get a sense of what they care about. So you take some with a pinch of salt, but yeah, generally you'll see themes, you'll see common themes.
Yeah.
And also because the homepage editors on these titles are looking at real-time data, if you're looking at the top of a homepage, you will see patterns, and you will see that, okay, this type of story about pensions is on there for the second day running. It must be doing really well. So can our client that's a pension provider, can they come up with a different angle? Even though you haven't got access to the data as a PR, you can kind of get a sense of what's working just by looking at the homepage and by looking at the comments.
Brilliant insight. Helen, I wish we had more time, but we are running out of time. So very quickly, where can people find you?
Oh, thank you very much. So yes, you can see all about me on LinkedIn if you search for Helen Barnett. And also I've got my website, which is helenbarnettmedia.co.uk.
And we must get you on again. Thank you so much.
Lovely talking to you.